Hi, I'm Jenna Hastings,
And I'm Sydney Cole.
and today we'll be engaging in a conversation about critical thinking.
Alrighty, do you want to start off with questions or do you want me to go?
Yeah. So I'm just going to start with like a basic question about, is it possible for critical thinking to be taught?
I mean, honestly, I feel like most of the articles agree that it's able to be taught. It just really depends on like what situation you're going to teach it in. Like some of them are like, oh, you can only teach it in like specific categories for like specific content, but other ones are like, yes, there should be like a generalized critical thinking class a la this class.
I also kind of agree with that. I think it's super important, or I think a lot of articles talk about like using critical thinking skills. And so instead of like having direct like classes or anything, like I think you can measure it by like noticing those skills like adaptability, open-mindedness, like good communication and like other skills like that. So that way you'll be able to like measure and see if you were taught that, because it is so hard. Critical thinking is ambiguous. So it is hard for you to like know if it was taught.
Yeah, I feel like honestly, it's so weird because it's a bunch of like skills that are, you said, like difficult to measure. Like it's like, how are you supposed to measure the level of like open-mindedness a person has about a topic? Or like, how are you supposed to measure someone's like discussion skills? Like, I mean, you can tell when people are like good at discussing, but there's not like a 1 to 10 scale on like how good people are at like all the different like skills that you could technically teach in like a general critical thinking class.
Right. Which is why I think it is really hard to tell if you can be taught that. So that's like a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, I almost feel like, I mean, I just recently read like the last 2 articles, so maybe that's like biased talking, but I feel like them coming at it from like the perspective of like, oh, like you should like have like specific skills taught for your specific subject. I feel like that's really like intelligent. Like if you think about it, all the discussions we're having could like about like politics and like fossil fuels and the transgender thing, like all of those different like things that we've discussed, those could be conversations that we could have had in a different class, and we could have just had more conversations like that, but like we could have talked about like the science and the like in genetics like behind the transgender thing, or we could have talked about like geology and how climate change is affected by like the rising levels of CO2 and how like fossil fuels are affecting that. Like I feel like it would almost be like having a generalized critical thinking class is like dipping your toe in a bunch of different places, and I feel like it could be like if there was like a specific critical thinking class for each like different like major, or like a field, like a science critical thinking where you like discuss stuff based on like science.
Yeah, I really like that idea. I think that like implementing it into the curriculum is super useful too, just because you'll be able to like apply what you already know. Like you're gonna learn this anyways, so then like apply it to a higher level and like use those skills to like engage in critical thinking. And I really do like the critical thinking class, and I think it is super useful, but I do think it's super general, and for those separate topics, I think that I really like that major idea, like having those different like specific subjects, like going into it even further, because critical thinking class is so general. You can't like use it only for science or only for math, because there's just so many. So like whatever you major in, I really like that idea.
Yeah, because I feel like it's like a lot of like, you have to know like content to like really be good at like discussing something. So I feel like honestly, like having like a general critical thinking class like the one we're taking, and then having like a second, like having like a 2 semester, like the first being like general, and then the second being like, okay, now that you have like content from like first semester that like pertains to your major, now let's go into like second semester and like start talking with that like content knowledge about like all these like different like discussion topics for your like specific major, or like whatever like field you're going into.
Yeah, that kind of brings it into like another question about like the first semester and second semester. You said, like, how old do you think you should be when you like start learning critical thinking, or like really engage in learning it?
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like, I don't know, like I feel like it could be like a freshman level college, but like I also feel like freshman year of college you don't really have a content basis for the major. I feel like if we're talking general critical thinking class, it should be more of like a high school class, like prepare you for college, so that you have like those skills so that when you get to college you can like just automatically go into like oh, like let's put you in a critical thinking class for your major where we can like teach you content and then discuss the content, but you already have like the basis of like skills that you know would be useful that are transferable to like use in that semester. But I don't know, like if we're talking about like subject specific, I feel like it should be like in college.
Yeah, I definitely think it should be like in higher education. I do think that like in high school it would be super useful, but
are you good?
Yeah, sorry about that.
You're totally fine.
But like I think that like learning it in high school would be good, but I don't know how I feel about like learning it when you're like in middle school or like littler, because when you are that young, like it is easy to forget things, and you aren't like learning a lot of you are learning a lot of curriculum, so it's hard to apply something like that when you're already like learning the basis.
Yeah.
So I really like the idea of it being like later in high school or in college.
Yeah. I don't know. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Oh, you're good. Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like just teaching it at like an older age, or like honestly even like, this is gonna sound like way off bat, but like having like some sort of like intro, you know how like you go into jobs and they have like orientation?
Yeah.
Like, if they had like for like higher level jobs, if they had like in their orientation like a class on critical thinking. Like I feel like that could be super useful. Like especially since not all schools have like critical thinking classes, especially like mandatory critical thinking classes. I feel like having that be part of you're getting the job and like learning how to like do stuff in like a higher paying job, not necessarily higher paying, but like jobs that require you to have like critical thinking skills. I feel like, because that was like a lot of the articles talked about there not being a lot of like critical thinking skills in the workforce. Like people were just like forgetting stuff, or like they had never been taught, so they just like weren't applying like skills and stuff. But I don't know, I feel like that could be like a really interesting way to like teach critical thinking, I guess.
I like that a lot because you can apply it to that specific situation then.
Yeah.
And like then it will like go for that situation, kind of talking about like Article 5 when it talks about like not doing a generalized thing, like more specific for that thing. And that kind of like ties back to, in the first article, it talks about how like for close to 50 years, educators and politicians from classrooms to the Oval Office have stressed the importance of graduating students who are skilled thinkers. And like even when they're graduated, they're not like skilled critical thinkers.
Yeah.
So I think that that would like help, even if they didn't learn it in high school or college, that like you would get it before you started your career.
Exactly. I feel like that whole like it's like solving a problem that like it shouldn't theoretically exist. Like theoretically colleges should be like popping out people ready for the workforce, but like it's not always going to be like that.
Yeah.
Because like people fall asleep in class, they don't pay attention, they don't care, they don't take the class, and then like they're not going to like graduate with those skills, or like they forget them along the way. Mm-hmm. Because like especially if it's like a freshman year class, that's 4 years to basically forget. Or like if you're going to be a doctor, that's like a bajillion years. I don't know how long is doctor school for.
Yeah. And also it's just like it's hard to measure, like we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
It is hard to measure if you did learn it even.
Yeah. It's ambiguous.
Correct. It's ambiguous.
Oh, we could totally stop it here. We definitely went way over time.
Oh, good.